Everybody, welcome to Junkyard Theory. This is episode number 14, and tonight's guest is somebody who's been in the comic book industry for quite a while, and he's also worked on quite a few film productions, and he also designed the White Walkers from the hit phenomenon Game of Thrones. Please welcome William Simpson. William, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you very much, Kash, for asking me.
My pleasure. How's it been over there? How's the pandemic been suiting you guys?
I think it's probably the same as everywhere else in the world. I mean, the logistics are a bit awful. There seems to be quite a lot of deaths, a lot of people hospitalized. But I've spent the last year at home, working away at home, and any of the jobs that have come through. I get asked, "Can you work from home?" And I said, "Absolutely, of course." And I've learned more about gardening in the last year than I ever had in my life, and I've ended up digging ponds as well, to pass the time. And it's like, for once in our lives, we had a really, really, really hot summer last year, or period of
okay.
Yes, which is, well, not your kind of heat, but our kind of heat. And the thing was, it was just amazing because we spent so much time in the day in the outside. So I went out and I dug holes and I planted flowers and I built ponds and small wall things. And then I would come in like towards the end of the afternoon, and then I would start work, and then you'd work through the evening into the morning, because my whole cycle changed again. So I became a night worker.
So you've been learning, gaining new skills at the same time. Gardening, I mean, that's miles away from storyboarding.
Absolutely, but it's artistic gardening. You go out there and you plant by color. I get instructions on it.
That's awesome.
Wendy, my wife, she says, "Plant it there, plant it there, plant it there." Yeah.
So essentially, she's directing your garden storyboarding, yeah?
Kind of. Although I have a tendency to override certain things. Oh, I'm going left with this tree.
That's brilliant.
Well, but it's
awesome.
I haven't missed, actually, not too much. I haven't missed being out, because once you accept that this is the way you're meant to be, you actually and because it's artwork that I do, I mean, you spend so much of your time just being creative at home. It doesn't matter. You're in a room anyway, which you would be if you were going to work in a studio, or if you're going to work in your own studio, you'd be in a room. So I do miss the ability to get out and photograph a lot of stuff. I mean, I normally have a camera with me everywhere.
I want to kind of come back to that process, like you take pictures for reference, but could you kind of tell us a little bit about how did you get into storyboarding? Like, give us a little bit of an origin story about yourself.
Okay, well, the origin for storyboarding is basically that I'd done whatever it was, 15 years of drawing comic strips at the time. Whenever the first kind of film thing happened, and I was wandering about in London after a convention, and I bumped into a friend who asked me about what I was doing at that time, and of course I wasn't doing very much in particular. I was actually in between comic jobs, and he said, "Would you be interested in storyboarding our low budget feature film?" And I said, "How low budget?" and it was low budget, but the point was that I thought, how difficult can it be? I mean, it's kind of like a comic strip anyway. And I said, yeah, I'd be interested. And I read the script, and it was a kind of slightly futuristic thriller thing, and not enough so that it's loads of rocket ships going about the place, but it was a slightly futuristic film called 24 Hours in London, and it went it was straight to video in those days. It wasn't even DVD, it was to video. And the thing was, I did it from home. I had come back to where I lived, and um, I was basically drawing my storyboards in the day, faxing them over to the company in the evenings, and 2 days later they would be shooting something, and it was just this crazy thing. And I kind of liked that. I enjoyed that. And then I got involved in the Northern Irish film kind of fraternity. And that I mean, I'm not exactly sure how that happened. I think it was probably to do with a bar somewhere at some point, and a conversation, which then which then led to me doing some work on a couple of short films. And it was kind of design work. The one that I remember well was a design job on a little short called "Tonight We Fly," and it's about two aging superheroes that meet up for one last kind of fight. A superhero, supervillain. It's kind of very Alan Moore if you think about it. It's that kind of story that he would have done. And the thing was, I got asked to come down to set on the Sunday when they were shooting, and I thought, oh, that would be really nice. So I went down to see the film set because I hadn't been on before, and somebody handed me a sandwich and a small bottle of beer, and I thought, well, this is fantastic. Is this how films are done? And I got to see the thing, and I kind of realized, well, I actually really like this. And then it kind of there was I ended up doing animation work with my brother, who was a CGI animator, and we had our little company for a couple of years, Rogue Rocket, and that involved going to Cannes TV Marketplace for about 5 years, I think it was, trying to push the animation projects we were doing. And that also, during that time, got me into writing film scripts and stuff, because we started to work on ideas, of course, that were our own. And so we had to, when we came up with the ideas, then it was a case of somebody writing the things. So I got to start writing scripts, which I've continued to this day. And just like yourself, it's one of those things where you write short films, you write feature films, and you hope that somewhere down the line you may actually get to make them. Because that's the other thing that happened to me in that period of time as well. I got to direct some stuff because, again, most of my life is through flukes, it's through accidents. And it's just a fact that accidents happen to me, but in a good way. And the thing was that, I mean, man, I must have done something to get this good karma going about it. Great. Anyway, the thing is that within Rogue Rocket, we had a music video to do where I'd storyboarded up this music video and had all these ideas into it. And we had three. When you get money together and you get them from different sources, and we had these three pots of money, and one of the pots went. It was decided these people wouldn't back us, so we still had two pots of money, but not the third part. And the third part was meant to pay for a director and a cinematographer. Now the thing was, the guys, we sat there and thought, well, do we lose the other two pots of money, or do we try and do something here? And they all turned to me and said, well, you storyboarded it, you can direct it. I mean, it's not that big a step. Well, I mean, because it's a short, it's a music video. It's so. I thought to myself, well, all right, why not? Let's try it. And there was a couple of guys working with us who were great at doing camera work. So we planned it out. We talked to the band, and we went and shot a load of stuff. And we went to places that I had kind of designed in the storyboards. We found the places to go to, and I made this first music video. And its great claim to fame is that it was shown publicly at a Metallica concert in Dublin, where everybody booed at it because it wasn't metal. Music video. And so
who decided to screen it there?
It was brilliant. It was brilliant because the thing was, you ended up with I mean, I heard about it, and it ended up on MTV2 or something once upon a time. So it's just one of those weird things. And then from that, we did another music thing, and then I got to do. This is all over a little period of time. I ended up people suggesting I put in for a short film. So I put in 3 scripts for a film commission kind of competition thing. And they said, well, which one of them do you want to do? They thought that all 3 were fine. And I thought, excellent. So I did the one that I assumed would be easiest. And it was only when we started looking at the logistics of it, you know the way, okay, somebody asks you for your ideal setting, how, what way do you want this film to be? And I'm saying, well, I want beautiful sunshine, and I want light coming through the trees and dappling against the wall, shadows against the wall, and all of that beautiful warmth that you get. And of course, the cameraman looked at me and said, "Are you kidding? It's Northern Ireland." And it's like you guys, yes, you must have beautiful sunshine and wonderful torrential rains and stuff, and it must be absolutely gorgeous.
Sometimes, yeah.
You're almost guaranteed at least what the light's going to look like. Well, over here, we had a whole year where every day it was different. Every day it would be raining, it would be sunny, it would be dull, it would be windy, it would be something, but you couldn't get a consistency. And the guys were asking me, I just ideally that's what I would like, and it got postponed for the weekend it was meant to be shot, and luckily it did, because it poured with rain. But the weekend that it was due to go ahead, we walked out first thing in the morning, and the skies were clear. They were blue. The sun was coming up and shining all over the place. And I was on a street corner, two roads, like, it doesn't work well enough. It's not a 3D. 2 roads together. And around the corner. It's called Cornered. Anyway, the thing was the light. The weather forecast said the light was going to be like this for 2 days. The sun was going to be there for 2 days. And we had 2 days on this short shooting in absolutely perfect sunlight. And it was on the last shot, the very last shot, as my character's walking away down the street, the clouds started to come over and it started to rain right at the end. And I just came away going, thank you, thank you. It was like, yeah, something was doing something. It was absolutely superb. And it's just a little short. Now, it never got seen anywhere because there was sound issues that I've still to this day not quite sorted out. But I used it to get directing work for a couple of commercials. So I got to do a couple of commercials on the basis of that, and thought, wow, I'm now into the new business of directing advertisements for TV. And just as everything was going fine, the bottom dropped out of the advertising market over here in Northern Ireland, and suddenly producers weren't paying any money to get people to do things. And it was like, in fact, the producers were directing themselves. So I sort of went, well, there you go. And I went back into drawing my pictures again, which I hadn't stopped doing, obviously. But it started me writing more and more film scripts, and it also started me storyboarding and doing concept work on different projects. So that the next actual feature film that I got to do was there's a British writer called Spike Milligan. Well, he's half Irish or totally Irish, I'm not sure. Anyway, he was a comedy writer way back in the time when television was black and white. Anyway, he wrote a book called Puccoon, and Puccoon, not cocoon, Puccoon, is a story about being crazy and Irish, and the border being drawn up, and people living in a bar where there was a line down the center of the bar, which was the border, and so people on this side were paying more than people on this side for drinking in the same bar, and all these sorts of crazy, quirky, mad things. It was really weird, strange story. But I got to do a couple of weeks storyboarding on that, and then I got to do 6 weeks of standby prop or assistant standby prop, because they had this other job going, and I thought, hey, wow, that would be good. Does that mean I'm on set? And they said, yes, all the time. And I said, fantastic. And so I learned more about filmmaking and what not to do in my 6 weeks on set than I ever would have worked.
And how do you think that helped you, the storyboarding process? You know, being on set, because normally storyboard artists don't really end up on set, but you've been there, you've directed commercials, short films, music videos. So how did that experience kind of play into the storyboarding process? Has it in any way?
It was.
Has it played into your storyboarding process?
I think everything does. I think every single thing we bump into in life plays into the storyboarding process. I think because there's the one great thing about being on set and about seeing a set and seeing locations was that you got a better understanding of the things that you'd already drawn or the things that you were going to draw. Certainly in future jobs, because once I'd done my first couple of weeks storyboarding on that film, there was no more storyboarding work. That's why I took on the other job. But the great thing was seeing some of the stuff that you'd been working on start to play out. And it was kind. I mean, the director had said at the time he wished they'd had more time to storyboard more stuff, which would have been good, because it was one of those films, where somebody does like 27 takes of everything, and you're actually looking at it going, but you had it take 3. So anyway, it's a very double-edged sword and very interesting experience. But it was the best thing for me to do. I mean, and bumping into some of the crazy actors as well was fantastic. And I just got a much better sense, because it was a big team thing. But then the next film that I got to do, and that came out of working on this film Cocoon, because a friend of mine was a sound engineer who said that they were making a pretty big movie down in Dublin, and I should actually send them down some of my work. And it was Spyglass, I think, was the name of the company doing it. So I got in touch with them. And it was near Christmas, because we finished Cocoon pretty near Christmas. So I rang them up and asked, could I come down and show you some work? And they said, if you really want to, I mean, it's like, it's very near Christmas. There may not be anybody here. And I said, well, is there an art director or something? And they said, yeah, there'd probably be an art director. And I said, well, would you mind if I came down to the studios? And they said, if you really want to. So I kind of took a bit of my day, because it was 100 miles to Dublin. So I get in my car, go down to Dublin, and I got to the studios late-ish, because traffic was horrendous there. It was near Christmas. Anyway, I get there, and I start showing my portfolio to the production manager, and she's going through the and she suddenly stops and goes, I guess, actually, would you like to talk to one of our supervising art directors? And I'm going, okay, thinking to myself, they only said there was going to be an art director here. So they arranged for me to go out to meet Jonathan McKinstry, who's gone on to bigger and better things. So I go out to meet Jonathan, and he starts looking through the portfolio, and he's going, yes, well, hold on a second. And he picks up the phone, and he makes a phone call. And I hear these footsteps upstairs, and there's a dum, 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 coming across the floor, and down the steps comes this little small German guy, who is this amazing production designer, as it turns out, called Wolf Kroger. And so Wolf's going through my portfolio, and he's going, yeah, 9, yeah, 9, 9, yeah, 9, yeah. So there was more yeahs than nines, and he said, you will start in January. And I go, as what? And he says, as a production illustrator, you start in January. And I went, well, thank you very much. And so I went away that Christmas with a job to come back and do illustration work, concept illustration work. And under Wolf's, oh my God, this man was amazing. And this was my first big movie, which was a film called Rain of Fire, which is a big dragon movie with Christian Bale and Matthew McConaughey and so on. And I got to do some nice concept work on that, and a storyboarded ending that was never used. But it's all these great things that you know, it was they were doing something like 5 different endings, trying to work out what they were wanting. So I had one of them to storyboard. So that was kind of interesting. And then
quick question.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but
Sorry. Yeah,
that's actually the question that I had, you know, jotted down. What do you feel when, you know, something that you storyboard doesn't really end up making the cut?
Doesn't bother me because you're actually, you know, you're getting paid to work on this thing. So you do the storyboard, and you know, you do it with all of the interest and you know, the care that you do put into a storyboard, and you know, you're trying, especially when you know it's on spec as well. You actually look at it as if you're a director, because they're not giving you notes on what to do. You're just taking the script and you're drawing that script. And again, it's just like doing comic work, you know, in a lot of ways, except you're restricted to a frame, and you're drawing extra frames that are moving figures along and camera shifting about. But the point is, it's a potentially what can be, because the other thing is, though, because I've done so many storyboards that you're actually seeing them on screen. You know, you realize then the influence that you've had in helping make the thing happen. That's really nice. I mean, that is a thing where you know, you're actually pleased that your job has you know, an effect on the film. So so it doesn't bother me if you're doing something that in the end doesn't happen, because you've still drawn it. You've still been part of the job. So that's okay.
Very true.
I mean, I've done so many influential things that don't appear on screen. It's been actually nuts. I mean, if I showed you the work from the film Your Highness, which I did years later, I mean, Your Highness, I spent the first 2 months of that job drawing concepts, and it was mostly drawings. There was a couple of paintings, but most of it was drawing concepts that the guys loved, but would never appear on screen, because you were drawing the stuff that was going to be too expensive. It wouldn't happen. But I mean, I remember. I mean, it's a brilliant kind of moment in my life where Danny McBride comes past me, and he says, "Well, we need to come up with this idea." He said, "Can you draw us this snake creature, this kind of dragony snake creature, and we're, you know, it's lying there between two rock surfaces, and we're going to walk across the back, and then it's going to do all this shit, and we're going to fall off this thing, and it'll be great." And I said, "No problem, Danny." So I sit down and I draw the piece of work, and I'm really enjoying myself because I've been given such a free hand to come up with things. Next day, Danny comes back and he goes, well, that's fantastic. David, look at this. This is fantastic. This is fantastic. It's too expensive. We can't do it. Let's think of something else.
That's kind of, it always happens in film, doesn't it? Like budgetary restraints and all that stuff. But yeah.
I mean, it's one of the reasons why, in a way, I mean, I keep pushing this for anybody doing low budget stuff. If they get the storyboard for a low budget film, you actually have, I mean, if you invest in that, which is, you know, is you and a guy or you and a girl, whatever, doing the boards, you've got a plan for the film that you're wanting to make. It's there, it's on paper. And in a lot of ways, because you can go through that and decide, well, that's too expensive, whatever. You've got it all done on paper before you go near, you know, a crew of people to be out there shooting, where the expense comes in. But also, it doesn't matter if you change it. The fact is, I mean, I've storyboarded my own stuff and gone out and on the day realized, well, no, we've got that information in this shot. We don't need to do this shot. It doesn't really add anything to it. So let's skip on to the next thing. And so, but the point is, the plan's already there, so you can come in and out of it if necessary. I mean, it's different if it's, well, it's not different. If you've got a hugely expensive movie, at least you know what it's going to cost by looking at the shots that you've actually designed. So for local filmmaking, which of course In low budget filmmaking, it's one of the first things that everybody throws out of their budget. Oh, we can get by without a storyboard, and they can possibly, but it's one of those things that in a lot of ways, I mean, because if you've directed stuff as well, you know, even if you don't draw very well, you can still do stick figures and things and work out where things. Right. But the point is that is still a storyboard. It's still a working out what you're going to need. Now, the lovely thing is if you've got somebody who can draw doing it, you're seeing it more clearly whenever it's drawn. And I mean, my experience of seeing directors at work and so on, I've seen where it works. I've seen where it's not been needed. I mean, if it's a story that's completely talking heads, you know, you're not really going to need it.
Yeah.
You know? It's just going to be the couple of camera angles. But I still, for my own stuff, I still like to make sure that I've drawn that in. Okay.
And how did the job for Game of Thrones come about?
I was working on Your Highness, and I was working on Your Highness, and my producer Mark Huffman came to me one day and said, "Would you mind doing a bit of moonlighting?" And I said, "Okay, what on?" And he said, "Well, there's this potential project that may be coming to town." And I said, "Well, what is it?" And he said, "I can't tell you." And I said, "Well, what?" Well, I said, "Oh, that's not helping." I said, "Well, what's it about?" And he said, "Well, it's kind of medieval fantasy." And I said, "Well, we're doing that sort of on Your Highness anyway. I mean, it was medieval fantasy comedy." And he said, "Well, would you meet the production designer and the supervising art director?" And I said, "Sure, no problem." And they were the only two people in town. So I go along to this little office, and I meet up with the two folks, and Gemma was the production designer then, and we have this chat where they show me a bunch of castles and things, and I'm given little bits of description, but there's no headers on it to tell me what it is. And so I said, okay, no problem. So I had to go away and draw a bunch of castles, a bunch of knights in armor, some giant wolves, and a couple of beheadings. And I kind of so I did this. Beheadings. So I did this stuff, and I handed it back into the two folks, and all I knew was it was going away to America, and that was it. So I came away thinking, "Oh wow, an American company, brilliant, excellent, that'll be fun." Go back to my day job on Your Highness, because the stuff I did for this project was the weekends and a couple of nights. So I go back to my day job on Your Highness, and I'm working my way through Your Highness, enjoying this crazy stuff, because as I did loads of concept work, and then I had a break for a week, and they bought me back as a storyboarding artist to do the storyboards, which was great fun. Anyway, so I'm sitting there working on something, and Mark Huffam comes to me and says, "We've got a Game of Thrones." And I said, "Is that what I was working on?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, does that mean I have a job on it?" And he said, "Absolutely." So the thing was, when I finished Your Highness, and I mean, it's really strange saying it, but I mean, it was really funny because it was a Wednesday, I think it was. I finished on the Wednesday, and on the Thursday, I was on to Game of Thrones. You know, I had my couple of days before the weekend. And the nice thing was David and Dan knew my comic work and stuff. And so there was this almost straight away, they kind of knew that they had somebody who could deal with a bunch of different stuff like this. And got on the best with everybody there, and it was like I was drawing for all these different departments, which is why the White Walkers thing came up, because the first job I did on Game of Thrones was, and this is on the pilot, was designing the weapons, the hero weapons for our characters. So you know, ice and needle and longclaw, and there's a whole host of major weapons that I got to design, and that carried on into the first series. I got to do a bit more stuff, but and then I did a couple of carriages for Cersei, and did a painting of the Godswood tree, you know, to kind of, because a lot of the stuff that I would do as concepts was stuff to kind of make people get started talking about what it was that they wanted, you know. So it'd be a starting point for loads of things. Anyway, the White Walkers, the guys came to me and said one day, you know, we need White Walkers. Would you have a crack at those? And I say, sure. And I sat down and I started off doing a bunch of paintings on the White Walkers. And that was the basis then for what they would become. Now, remember, you go from a painted image to guys working in a prosthetics room or you know, and also trying to work out, was it going to be a CGI thing or was it going to be a real person? And I know they did a combination of elements in there. So what comes out on screen isn't absolutely the thing that I painted or anything, but the thing that I painted informed what came out on screen. So, you know, it's what it is. It was the starting point. So it's brilliant. And you really, now that's something, you know, you were saying earlier about, you know, when you do a piece of work and it doesn't appear on screen. Well, the great thing with Game of Thrones was everything that you did was going to be up there. You know, the storyboards for a TV series, you know, certainly in a fantasy world thing or a science fiction thing or whatever, they're going to be really tight. They're going to be something where the director is asking you to do them because they actually serve a purpose. So you're you know, and you know, the opening scene in Game of Thrones, the very opening stuff that I did with Tim Van Patten, you know, we knew that the opening sequence was meant to grab everybody, and that was it. Yeah, I was going to, and we were out in the forest, looking all around the location that was going to be all snowed up, which, of course, at this moment in time, it's beautiful sunshine and it's in the afternoon and it's lovely. But we went round the location, working out where people would be, where they would be looking from. You know what were going to be the viewpoints, what was going to take place, how we were seeing it, and I took my notes and did little scribbles and went back to the studio and got on with that stuff. And then Tim had to present it to the HBO producers, the money people, to kind of say to them, well, this is what we're thinking. And it got approved instantly. And he came out and told me, he said, you know, we got it. It's done. And that's a really lovely feeling. And then when you actually see it having been filmed and it is what you storyboarded, that's great, because again, as I say, it's a justification for you know, the work that you do. It's basically your position has some kind of meaning, you know. And that's no, but this is the thing, and you know this from doing your own stuff, is that there's a realization that every single job in a film crew is so important. From you know, and there's guys at the top getting all the cash. There's the guys in the middle getting really good cash, but in a certain level, and you know, they're doing their stuff every day. And then there's all the folks that are they would consider at the bottom in a way. But the people at the bottom are feeding the people at the top. The people at the bottom are keeping everybody going. And it's one of the things that I love about the actual film production itself, when you're actually, you know, on the shooting crew in any kind of way. And I remember just going back to the fact that I'd done some shorts myself, and I remember the very first day on the first short where I'm sitting. We've already shot two setups, and the third setup's being done. We're moving across the road. We're setting up in this corner, and this is where all mission's going to take place. And I'm looking at the monitor with a hood over my head because it's so beautifully sunlit outside, and it's going to, you know, bleach out that screen. So I'm sitting with this hood over my head, and I'm just looking at this beautiful widescreen shot that I've got, because I wanted to film it as if it was the greatest film ever made, and it was going to be widescreen. There I am with my letterbox. I'm looking at it, and my actress Sarah's there, and the walls drifting away this way, and there's a line of trees drifting away, and she looks great, and the sunlight's hitting her perfectly, and I'm just grinning. And somebody lifts the hood, and hands me in a cup of black coffee, and I hadn't asked for it, and I thought, yes, this is what filming is all about. And so this is the point, and this is the thing when I remember on Game of Thrones, you know, all those days where you had the you know, the assistants and runners and stuff running about, coming into you and looking for your lunch order. Oh my God, man. It was just all the things you don't have to think about. They're covering, you know, within that production office and within all the people that are ferreting about. And that's nothing to do yet with the actual production being filmed. And then it's the same when you get on the crew where you know, there's the assistants of the assistants of the assistants of the assistants and so on. And you've got this line of people, and every single one of them is in there doing their bit. It's just brilliant. Yeah. Anyway, there you go.
It's that collaboration.
Yeah, it's just interesting to me. You know,
it's perfectly fine. I mean, like I had absolutely no idea that you've been on set, like you directed stuff before. Because this coming from a storyboard artist, I'm like fascinated as well. So my question is, did you ever have any sort of like any inkling of an idea that Game of Thrones would turn out to be the massive phenomenon that it did become?
No, because you know, one of the things people always ask you, you know, did you read the books? I hadn't read the books. I mean, it was one of the, I didn't know anything about Game of Thrones. You know, to me, Game of Thrones was just, I don't even think I'd heard of it. Whenever I got asked to do, you know, the moonlighting job, and the crazy thing is, you know, I was a big fan of Conan the Barbarian. The Robert E. Howard stories, you know, are brilliant, and I've read the paperback versions, and I've read all the, you know, well, a lot of the comic book versions, which again I grew up with, and so that kind of prehistory fantasy world for me was something, you know, brilliant. I just loved it. And then of course when I got into my interest in a way, the gods of the world and the archaeological kind of reference pointing to everything in this blooming planet, and you're seeing the most amazing things and the most amazing myths that are being talked about, and the most, you know, all this stuff that they tell us, you know, is before humanity, and then you find out that they find something that's much older than the time period that they think about. So then you're into the fantasy world of prehistory. You're into this gorgeous kind of rich environment of ancient cities and crumbling cities, and, you know, ancient civilizations that inhabited these places. And so Game of Thrones was like that. I mean, for me, it was like stepping into a perfect kind of Conan story. I mean, I was when I read the first script, you know, it was, I mean, it was great. You're suddenly, wow, what happens next? So then I figured I better read the book. So I read the first book, and you know, it was a great story. I mean, a great yarn, and I knew that was then, I mean, going to be the first season of Game of Thrones, and even while we were working on it, you know, again, it's like all these things. You're trying to do your best job on whatever it is. You're putting in everything that you can do, and you're watching people creating this stuff and designing things that you know, you're so stunned by, because, you know, when a set goes up and you're looking at the set and you're thinking, wow, and you're in that world, you know, you walk around it and there you are. And it's one of the things that I've loved about anything to do with film sets that I've seen. You know, we did a movie over here called City of Ember, and it's not a great movie, but the set was stunning. It was phenomenal, and you could get lost in it. You know, there's all these little corridors and alleyways that were built into it, and so this is the thing with walking around a studio, and you're delving into these sets. It's very easy to get yourself into the mindset, you know, that allows you to really start feeling this world out. Anyway, so that's the thing with Game of Thrones. The more they built, and the more we saw the actors doing their thing, and I mean, those first couple of seasons, I was called over to set quite a lot, because the directors were you know, tight on time, and sometimes the only time they'd get to talk to me was if I went over, you know, if we had to do corrections on things, you'd go over to go over to set, and in between their takes, you would be having a chat with the director, and the actors would be wandering around, off waiting in the background and stuff, having their cups of tea, and you'd have a discussion with the director. Then they'd go and do the next take, and you'd wait, and then you'd have the next discussion with the director, and all the time, you as a fan of film are sitting there enjoying this whole experience of, wow, am I lucky I'm getting to sit here on set and watch these people, doing their thing and chatting to some of them, and it's fantastic. And just you had great hopes for that first season, but the result. I mean, from even the opening episode, the reaction of people to it was phenomenal. And I remember I did a convention back in the days when we could fly to places. I did a convention in Thailand, in Bangkok, and I think it was their second big convention that they'd done, oh my God. It was there that the HBO guys were talking to me about it. And I was told that, Game of Thrones was the most illegally downloaded TV series in the Eastern world. And I thought, that is success.
That's very true. I think it's pretty much the same for Sri Lanka as well.
Yeah. What was it?
I think it's pretty much the same for Sri Lanka as well.
I would imagine it could be, because it was the same in Singapore. So, oh my God! But it's this lovely thing, because all of these people are rushing up to meet you who have seen the show, and you didn't know. I didn't know it was big in Thailand. Oh yes, it is, and everybody's watching everybody else's version of the damn thing. Anyway, it was really interesting, because it's not a usual thing for a storyboard artist to go zooming around the world and spend time at events. I mean, I did it as a comic artist, but it was still a strange step, and but it became great for a whole bunch of years. And I still get asked now, which is good, except we can't go anywhere. So I've got things lined up to go to, but we're all just sitting waiting to see if COVID will actually, will we all get vaccinated, and will we be able to actually go out into the world again? Because it has to be that way. Anyway, so anyway, the thing is, I got to Brazil, and I got to Thailand and China and Malaysia and Singapore. And I did, Monaco and Japan, and a whole load of places in Europe. I mean, I go to France a lot. There's a Thessaloniki in Greece is one of my favorite conventions. It's just brilliant, and and there's a wonderful one in Montenegro, at a place called Herceg-Novi, and you ended up having this kind of world tour thing. I mean, because I did stuff in America as well, because I was out, but it was always different. Actually, it was nothing to do with Game of Thrones, except for my Los Angeles work, because that was another thing that came out of doing artwork for Game of Thrones, was that they were going to be doing DVD extras and Blu-ray stuff. And David and Dan had said to me, "Would you be interested in doing some of this?" And I said, "Absolutely." So, and they got me onto that, and then the marketing department get me out to Los Angeles. So I was there for about 5 years. I would go out for a week or 10 days or something, and discuss all the stuff I was going to be doing with the guys there, and then see a lot of Los Angeles, and then do the work when I came back home, because whatever American rules about working there. It was what do we got here? We got questions, and the real world art and culture into the set and prop designs and such, especially in doing the research and finding compatible. See, I think a lot of this is done all the time. I mean, okay. Again, you've done your own short films, and you've done and you're aiming for your features and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the greatest things is finding locations out there that make sense. I mean, even back in the days when I did, there's a big comic book that I did called Rogue Trooper War Machine with Dave Gibbons. He wrote it and I did the artwork on it, and it became pretty successful as a book, and was reprinted by Heavy Metal, and it was reprinted by Tundra, and it gets its reruns every now and again. But one of the great things for that, when I was wanting to get reference photos, an idea of certain places, where I used to live, there was a big quarry up behind us, and I had my brother, and he's skinny. He's not a big muscly rogue trooper guy, but I had him running around with a wooden easel to be the gun, and running across this quarry and climbing up and inside lots of metalwork and stuff, and all of that was my referencing for ideas that were going to go into the book. Now, that's the same kind of stuff that I would do for film, except for film, of course, we're out there referencing locations where we know that there's maybe going to be a build on this, or we know that the landscape's perfect for things, or we know that it's a wall, it's a backdrop, it's something, and I think it's so important to be mixing those things, because the real world is more incredible than stuff we're coming up with in our heads. I mean, have you ever been to Bangkok? Have you ever done the kind
Not
of
Bangkok, no.
well, okay, but the thing about it is that I take. We were talking about photography earlier. I take tons of photographs of these places because you're instantly realizing even the way buildings are put together, and the type of the way people are, hanging around these places, and people going to work, and oh my God, Bangkok with reams of motorbikes and cars all juggling for position, and you're looking at all this stuff and you're getting these references, but the structures that are there, things like you get an ancient temple beside something very modern and kind of thrown together. And I mean, in Japan, it's the same. I mean, I could not stop taking photographs of Japan. And I was in Kyoto, and it's like, again, one of the things that fascinated me there, and it's the same thing that fascinates me in a lot of America, are telegraph poles. You've got these amazing telegraph poles, wires coming everywhere, because most of our telegraph poles have been removed and the wires are underground now. But in a lot of these countries, they don't seem to. That doesn't seem to be an option, because I guess with earthquakes and all sorts of things, who knows? But the point is, telegraph poles are there, wires are everywhere, buildings are being dissected by wires. There's all of these amazing things going on. And again, in Kyoto, you're walking down a very modern street, and there'd be a little temple tucked away in the street, and you're looking at all this stuff and seeing the old with the new and so on. So I hope that what the questioner asked, if it makes sense, but the thing is that definitely the real world out there, it's so easy to think about converting it. I mean, take Blade Runner, and the way that Ridley Scott based, I mean, it was a big set design, of course, but it's based on real world with extensions, and I mean, it's the greatest thing to go out there and see what's there. And actually,
essentially, you go out there, get references, and try to integrate that into your design as well. But my question would be, how does that feed into the story and the characters as well?
Again, if we're talking about locations, it's like when they came to Northern Ireland for Game of Thrones. There were certain castles that existed here. There were certain landscapes that existed that had certain tree formations or whatever. And there was and this again goes back to the other question. There's a lot of the stuff that was, there's a famous castle here called Dunluce Castle, which is a half-wrecked ruin that sits on the north coast. And it was used for the Iron Islands, the Greyjoy's place. And basically what they were able to do was to go up and film that landscape with the castle on top and add a fully formed castle to it and extra parts. And there's a rope bridge along our coast as well, which I think was used for part of the Iron Island stuff as well. And the thing is that all of these places are in, well, that's two places that are in existence. There's a lot of fields in Northern Ireland that were used where the field was used for a battlefield. And, there's those lovely trees there in the corner. But the point is that, that locations, certainly ancient locations, are great additions to what it is that you're wanting to do. There's another castle place in County Down that was, oh my God, the Stark's home. And again, I was down on set there for a while, and it's just beautiful seeing how something that already is an old building gets slight conversion, a few extra bits of wood, and suddenly you have something ancient. And that's all really important. And I think that does influence the story immensely because, again, it sets periods of time. A bit of reality with fantasy makes you believe the reality. The whole thing becomes real. It's like one of the greatest things in Game of Thrones was that everything was political intrigue. And you're going through this whole first series of political intrigue. You've been hit by some kind of crazy thing at the beginning, which was the White Walkers, a glimpse of these characters. And you're wondering all the way through, what the hell was that and where are they coming? And we don't see them again until the end of the second season. But when Dany goes into the fire and she comes out and she's got dragons on her shoulders, and you're going, oh, there's dragons. But it's totally acceptable because of the rest of the story having been so very realistic. So when you combine elements, for me, the best fantasy work is still tied in with something that's real. Like, I mean, George R. R. Martin has said, it's like the War of the Roses in British history, and again, you're dealing with a map that has been placed in a sense across Europe and North Africa and so on, and you can see how the different types of people are taken from the different areas of our own world, and again, Robert E. Howard did that all those years ago when he did Conan. There's a map at the beginning of every Conan story that is set over Britain, but Britain as a solidified mass connected to the rest of Europe, which it's not now. Anyway, the point is this beautiful map that has all these places on it, and again, it makes when you write a story, when you're telling a story, it's easy for your mind to shift into what is the world like in this part of a country. What are we getting to? If it's suddenly a hot area in North Africa, and you're feeling, well, okay, the folks are going to look a bit more North African, and it's beautiful then because you've got these combinations of elements that are much more believable.
I think the show did a really good task of setting out the layout, the geography, and everything with the intro as well, because you're taken through the whole map of the land, like you said.
And it changed as the seasons went. Yeah, that was amazing, and even the Simpsons version of it was fantastic. I know. I got to say that was one of the things that really kind of hit home was the kind of when you realize the influence of Game of Thrones on things, because I remember
on pop culture, basically. Yeah.
What was that?
On pop culture.
Oh yes,
it's so popular. Yeah.
Absolutely. I was watching one of the Big Bang Theory episodes, and I'm sitting there just watching the Big Bang, and they're arguing in the comic shop over a Game of Thrones sword. And I'm looking at the sword going, wait a minute, is that one of the ones I designed? you're watching this step on, from what you're doing, what you were doing on your daily job. And suddenly all these other shows that you looked at, it was being referenced. I mean, it was being referenced in thrillers. Cops were referencing it. It was being referenced in all sorts of other types of stories. And you're kind of thinking, oh my God, that's a stamp that has now been put on our universe. And here it is. And I worked on it. So it's like, wow.
How amazing is that, right?
It's pretty good. Yeah.
So Game of Thrones had multiple directors, throughout the 8 seasons. And what was it like working with people, different people? And I think there's another question about about ideas and people having difficulty explaining them, but we'll come to that in a bit. But What was it like, working with different directors and what they wanted? Because everyone's vision is different, but you still kind of had to maintain the same coherence in style, I guess.
Well, again, the thing is, you have a drawing style as an artist, so you're fitted into the whole thing. And the lovely thing was that I worked very well, it seemed, with the directors. We had five different directors usually in a season, and they would come at different times. It would be a staggered line of directors. So start work with the first and you'd be getting on with it when you'd go for a meeting then with the second director, and then they would start talking about stuff that they wanted, and you would be finishing off stuff for the first director when the second director stuff would start, and you start working on that as well as doing other stuff for the first director and so on. And then the third director would arrive, and so you get conversations with the third director and so on. And so it was all this staggering thing. But again, it's about the same characters. I mean, that's the thing about the story, that you have these characters that are popping up all over the place. But the reality again is that the storyboard is meant to inform people about what's going to happen and roughly how it's going to look. I mean, it's still, one has to remember it's a guideline, because the thing is, and a guideline can be drawn in many different styles. I mean, most productions have a couple of different artists working away on them, but as long as you're tapping into what the director's wanting, and as long as the director is letting you know about the particular scene and about the set that it's taking place in, and about the approach to shooting that they're wanting, you get on with it. I always say this, but it's like being a kind of a minor psychologist in a way. You go in and you have a chat with the directors, and you get used to them, and they get used to you, and they tend to be reasonably informal discussions that end up with you going away and drawing up something that it comes back to them. And if there's something in it that needs altered, we talk about it, and you go away and alter it, and that's all great. It's all okay, because the other thing is, as well as that, working with these different directors as well, sometimes they were looking for you to put in ideas, some of them, and so that if you think of anything that makes sense with the scene I just told you about, can you let me know. And so there'd be some of the storyboards would be very concise from a director, really, really right on the nail. And I mean, even those you sometimes have to go back and change things. And then there's other ones which are much looser, that are allowing you to have a little bit more input into how the story unfolds. But overall, you're totally being guided by the director. I mean, that's what your job is. But the lovely thing about it is you don't really have to talk to too many other people. It's just you and the director, and it's why there was a lot of times during Game of Thrones where different directors, you would only be able to get them for on a Saturday at some point, Saturday or Sunday, because it's their 2 days off, and if they've wanted to talk to you during the week and they haven't been able to, you know, because you see, this is the other nature about a show like that. You were so into it that you knew it's worth my while to spend an hour or two on Saturday chatting to the director, working out what we're going to do next week, because otherwise you don't get the chance to do this. So you would go in, and I remember with Michelle McLaren, it used to be great, because we ended up in the hotel she was staying in town, the Merchant Hotel, having high tea in the afternoon, and sitting talking Game of Thrones and drawing out storyboard roughs for whatever the scenes were that you were going to draw, and we had these great conversations, which actually led to me doing some storyboards for her for Wonder Woman, because originally she was meant to direct Wonder Woman, and it was one of my times in Los Angeles. We went for a dinner and sat down and worked out a bunch of boards for Wonder Woman, and I went home and drew them up, but then she walked off the project. So
Yes.
yeah, so it was, but again, that's another nice thing that I've done in my life, where there's these opening boards that I did for a film that turned out to be an amazing success with Patty, the other director, and but it's so nice to have actually drawn something for that film without being the actual film with the director that was originally there. Ah, look, it's nice little stuff in your life that you do.
Yeah.
Again, things that never make it anywhere. What's this? How would you make it work with someone who has the idea but finds it difficult to explain what they want? Like myself here. Well, this is one of the questions that kind of ties in with what you'd asked, which is again, different directors do have different ways of explaining stuff, and I loved working with David Nutter. David Nutter is one of these guys who is inspirational to talk to. He's brilliant, and he's amazing as a director, and he's very very kind of man. But David would do these scribbles. He would do these scribbles of where things were happening in a scene, on a
Mm.
set. And I'd be looking at them because it was like, oh my God, which color, which is who's what? And you would have this scribble thing that David knew what these scribbles were, but I couldn't. I find it really difficult interpreting those. But I would be sitting as he would talk. I would make my notes, do my little roughs, and be showing him the roughs so that I was making sure that I was somewhere along the line. But and then you would take away the scribbles because you knew there was something you were getting out of them, but you weren't exactly sure what it was. But that was just, oh my God, it was. I mean, I wish I had one to hand that I could show you. The thing was, but he was brilliant to work with because you talked all this stuff out, and then and a lot of the other directors, it's basically asking questions. If you're working with somebody who is um, is not really explaining it too well to you, you ask questions. You don't be afraid to ask questions. Like, wait your time, let them finish what they're talking about, and then ask them the question if it's a problem that you're having. You know, ask about this piece. Do you mean am I meant to draw it from this angle or what? Or do we have are we tracking this character when this happens? You, you try to talk through it the way the script is shown it to you, but also on listening to the director. It's very important to listen to the director and just get as much information down as you can possibly get. Very politely, get it down there. Um, and then go away and draw it. Because the thing is some folks are, folks, their heads are going in many different directions. They've got an awful lot of things to deal with on this. So you're trying to make it easier. You want to make them certain that you've actually got some of their information in your head. You've got some of their information down on paper. And again, the lovely thing is when you've drawn it and it needs its changes, they're more precise then because they can see the way it's going, and they can see the bits of them in what they've asked you for. But it's just important to listen. Yeah. For somebody who talks a lot, it's actually hilarious to say about listening. Any recommendations on good sources to learn about storyboarding? You see, this is a difficult one because
We had that question before as well, so yeah.
well, the thing about, sorry, because I haven't read all of these. The thing about it is, when a lot of students would ask me about how do I get your job, basically, how do I get into what you do? And the thing is, I didn't go to a university to learn about storyboarding at all. Storyboarding was a fluke that came about because of my comic strip work. Because I had drawn years and years and years of comic strips, I was already into how I told stories. Now, the point was that my telling stories was informed by all of the film that I'd ever watched, all of the TV I'd ever watched. Whenever I was doing my own comic strips, a lot of them uh, they would be aiming towards the more realistic side of drawing, and that's based on so much of the film information that I would have seen. So for me to have gone through all that and then ended up doing storyboarding work was, it's kind of an interesting circle. But the point is, when I started to do the storyboarding work, it was something that I was informing from my ability to read a script and imagine it in my head and then actually draw the stuff. And of course, if I've been given a free hand to do that, it's one of those things where um, you're totally working from your own imagination from reading a script. So if you can picture images from reading a book, you're partway there. You know, and I listen. The thing is that this is one of the reasons why it's very bad for me to be able to. I mean, for me to even think, well, what can I advise from the point of view of, reference books to this? Because the problem is, I never read any to do storyboarding, and that was because I was already doing comic strip work, and as I say, it just seemed to be a sideways step and a slightly differing thought process from the point of view that you were constantly aware of how do cameras move and so on. And the crazy thing was, I only realized really how cameras moved when I started to work on my own directing side of things, and realizing, I mean, especially during the commercials, I was working with a cameraman who was brilliant, who suddenly you knew that you could track and you could boom and you could push in and you could go back, all within the same motion within a camera. And then you're realizing, wait a minute, I'm not restricted to this setup, that setup, this, it was like you start to realize more. And I only realized that from actually doing directing side of things and working stuff out, that then a cameraman would talk to me about it and said we could link these together. And then you go, oh, of course you can do that. But saying that, there are probably a couple of brilliant books or even internet courses that are out there, that there must be other storyboard artists who have actually done these things. My stuff, you see, I mean, there's a book of Game of Thrones storyboards that's out there, that was really nice, that suddenly, boom, there's a bunch of the boards in a book. It's not complete, but the point is, there's a lot of storyboards, so you can actually see, okay, this is him telling the story. But the problem with that is, I guess you're not necessarily seeing the way my head's thinking totally, and because they've picked through things, you're maybe not getting the full flow of it, but you do see the way some things are broken down. I'm sure. I mean, I even reference some stuff on the net sometimes when I want to understand what a particular shot's meant to be, because I don't remember them all. It's like, so people in different countries will use different terms for a particular shot that one way, and somebody else is using a term that you're having to think, what does that actually mean? And then you're going, oh yeah, that's da 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 da. And it's something you just gradually learn with the more people that you work with. But there has to be a list somewhere of best storyboarding information books out there, I guess. But the thing that I would advise, no matter what you read, I think if there's stories that you're interested in, I think you sit down and try and imagine what they would look like to you. Try and work out what happens next. How does it happen? Where do I have to go in on a close-up? Where's the emphasis on these things? How do I break that down? See, that stuff that I did doing comic strips. Except in comic strips, you're picking the most defining shot. You're hoping that tells the information. You're not getting to see sometimes a lot of the information that's leading to it or going away from it. Although again, even in comic strips, we can do that by breaking panels up so that you can have a movement of somebody very cinematically in the same space that you would use, for one shot, whatever. But all of that is a question of you. If you watch a lot of films, if you then understand how they work by watching them, and you're interested in storyboarding, then take a story that you've got, like even if it's a film script or a book, a novel, try breaking down a novel page. Oh my God, the amount of information that is in one page of a novel, be drawing for days. Because the thing is, a novel is different from a film script, but it's a great tool to actually go from printed words into the imagination onto paper. And I think it's one of those things. I mean, there's sometimes we've done things like this, little mini classes at events where you get an audience to you read out a certain part of a script, and you get an audience to sit and draw a piece of work based on what you've just read out, and it's very interesting to see what people come up with. Now, it's also very interesting to see what a couple of storyboard professionals come up with when they're handed the same script, and sometimes what's really interesting is how close their minds are when it comes. It's almost like there's a certain set of logical steps that you need to put down in the script before you have got a director's interpretation put into it, where suddenly he's or she's invented a reason to get to the point where you're starting your drawing. And so you're coming back of a bird, or you're zooming across an ocean somewhere, and suddenly you find your characters at the end of that. But if you take the written word and break the written word down, you will have certain information that will be obvious in your head, and go with it, put that down. But I think it's a bit of practice, really. You're going to have to find that list. There must be a list of storyboard things. I don't have a book. I don't have one of my own that I can say, here's the storyboard course by William Simpson, because I don't even know how to interpret what's in my head sometimes. But I can explain it sitting in front of you.
Would you recommend reading graphic novels and comic books as maybe potentially like a starting point?
I think it's a really good thing, because a lot of the artwork is stunning, but also the good ones kind of will have stunning artwork, but also will be able to tell you the story. You will be able to see storytelling. You will be able to understand storytelling based on a lot of that stuff. Now there are good books on comic storytelling. Again, there's one Dave Gibbons, Tim Pilcher did. I've even got it over there. How Comics Work is a book that would be of interest. And there's also, is it Scott McCloud? Is it that did his brilliant series of books? And I mean, there's an artist called Howard Chaykin that if you look at his work, I mean, his mixture of sound with lettering against his very realistic kind of characters in whatever insane sci-fi world they're in is very interesting, because again, it's unique storytelling. But if you can look at the lettering on the sound, you can hear it in your head in a way that loud sounds are loudly lettered. They're big on a page, and in a way that's like us trying to prepare sound for a film, where you have to you've got a sense of what you need to come in at certain times. It's like, where do you start music or end music in a film piece? A lot of that is all down to what feels right here, and so on. But yes, immerse yourself in watching lots of film and also lots of comic books, I guess. Because a lot of comic books, there's certain periods of comic history where the influence for the comics is from film, and it's finding those artists. I think, there's definitely certain artists that would make sense, and looking at books that have a more realistic storytelling. It carries you along very, very well. I mean, I didn't realize when I started doing the animation stuff as well that I suddenly developed an animation style for the stuff we were doing, because we were designing a lot of the stuff. But again, you kind of were breaking the animation stuff down into, what are you wanting to see on screen? But again, it was like key images. I didn't get into doing all of the in-betweens. I was doing the sort of very key drawings to see what we're, where we're getting to with stuff.
What about CGI? How do you factor in CGI when it comes to storyboarding? Because you're gonna end up having dragons, or like you said before, the mix of prosthetics and CGI for the White Walkers.
Yeah.
How does that influence the storyboarding process?
Well, it's one of those things where you don't have to draw with the concerns in mind initially. Basically, you draw the storyboard just like you're telling any story that just happens to have dragons in it and happens to have whatever other creatures are going to appear CGI. But the thing about it is, every drawing that you do ends up costing a lot more money because anything with CGI in it, it's like a $20,000 hit on that shot. And so the thing is that you draw the story, and usually you do the first version of it where there's you're going by the script, and if the script asks for dragons here and dragons there and dragons everywhere, you're putting them in as it makes sense in the storyboard. But again, if you've been doing it for a long time, you have a tendency to be very aware somewhere in the back of your head that we don't need to see a dragon in this frame. We don't need to see a dragon in that frame. So you're going with live actors. But most of the time, the directors know that they're limited to how many CGI shots they can have, because some of the early boards that I did with different directors on Game of Thrones, we have lots of images where CGI elements are going to be there, and you gradually, when you come back to do the second version, you're taking out a lot of those images, or you're planning them to fit into one image where that's the image that the dragon's going to be flying around in the background, and you're not changing the shot. It's this shot, and you've got a dragon moving around, coming close, whatever, because that's all the CGI guys doing it, embedding it into the piece of film that has been shot. So my concern is only when a director tells me we have to do these 7 shots in 2. So we have to find a way of where are we shooting these from so that we can get as much information in as possible, but it's within 2 shots rather than 7 shots, 7 setups. So it's again, this is what I'm saying, where my side of things was always really great, because it was just me with a director working out stuff, drawing it all up, and then it would be the second approach where it would be closer to what you were going to see on screen.
So essentially, you become more economic as an artist as well the more time you spend on a series like this.
You kind of get a judgment thing going on, I think, in your head, where where it's just nonsense to add in too much stuff. I mean, again, it's a storyboard. It's not the photographic shot. It's a storyboard. It's got all of the story elements in there, but it's not a perfect painting or anything. It's not. See, this is the difference between storyboards and comic books. A storyboard, you're telling the whole story that's going to be on screen, but you don't have to draw it like a comic strip page. You don't have to put in all of the details that you need to put into a comic strip page, because one thing about a comic strip page is it shows more, I guess, your style of doing something, because the whole point is the readership has to buy into your style of a comic page. They have to believe in that world that you're helping to create on a page, and again, you as an artist have to get better at every single panel you draw. You want it to be a better panel than the one before. You want it to be, to tell the story first, but to be drawn as well as you possibly can draw it. Within a storyboard, a lot of the time you can get away with, an indication of something. It's there. You can see it's there, but it's not done in absolute detail. Now, there's some of my storyboards are more detailed than other storyboards that I've done, and that's just because you maybe had a little bit more time, and also you were really interested in that sequence that you were drawing. So you kind of had more effort invested in it. And then there's other ones where, we need a quick turnaround and it needs to be in tomorrow. And you basically are drawing for speed rather than drawing for perfect imagery. So you'll see a fluctuation. I mean, it's just a fact of what the boards are. There's a fluctuation. I can't make them absolutely perfect all the time. How long does it take to prepare a storyboard for one episode? That is basically how long is a piece of string, because the point is that some episodes needed more storyboarding than other episodes. And again, if we're talking about the Game of Thrones stuff, some directors didn't need very much in the line of storyboarding. A particular episode might be more about characters talking in a room, and so really, it was unnecessary to spend the time on some of those things. So it's why when you see versions of the episodes, and you're looking for storyboard information, they don't necessarily have lots of the information you're looking for because it was different things that you had to do. So I'm sorry, there's no way of me guessing. I just know that I usually did 6 months on Game of Thrones. I would go in on day one and I'd read the scripts through day one, day two, and then I'd start drawing on something, and I would end up at the end of 6 months getting my little letter saying, "Thank you very much for all your work. Goodbye," and off you went into the distance. But the point was, over that time period, there would be periods where there was really lots and lots and lots of work, and you were staying late at the office and things, and then there were other times where you were able to catch up time because there wasn't much taking place, because it was all so much on the basis of when you would get to see the directors, when you would get to talk to them, how you would get a chance to work this stuff out. But in that 6 month period, I mean, they figured it was necessary for me to be there, and you just kept on working through it. So again, it's like if you took one of those scripts as an episode and sat down and drew everything on it, there's a lot of stuff in there like a film script. So I mean, you could be quite a while, you could be a month on a script like that anyway without any trouble, because there's so much stuff in it. So the point is, you're getting scenes, scenes here and there. I mean, there's other films I've been on where, again, you've worked for maybe 2 months on a feature film, and that's done everything that needed to be done. I did a movie. I did two movies in Northern Ireland that I storyboarded 3/4 of the film. One was a
That's
movie called, it's a lot, but it was the nature of what it was going to be like. There's a film called Morgan, which was directed by Luke Scott, who is Ridley Scott's son, and
yeah.
and it was one where I went in for my first two meetings with Luke, and we discussed certain scenes. I went away and drew them, came back to him, we discussed more, went away, came back, and he said, "William, look, you know what you're doing. Can you just go and draw up the rest of the movie, and then I'll work my way through it and see what I can use, because I've got all these other things to concentrate on." Because Morgan was a lower budget movie, and so I did that. I sat in my room. I came in every day for work and just drew more scene, more scene, more scene, more scene, and continued through the story. And there's a lot of the stuff when I see the movie, I'm looking at it going, "Oh wow, there's a lot of bits in there," and
Mhm.
it was really nice because he didn't need everything to be sat over. He knew that he could look at that stuff, I think, and know that he could decide, okay, we want the camera in a different position, but all the information's there. So it was kind of interesting. I mean, I'd love to talk to him about it now and find out what way he did approach it. And then there was another movie called it was Halo, the live action Halo film that I did 3/4 of the storyboards, and that was with going in and talking to the director. But again, there's a lot of freewheeling through the script, getting from a bit to a bit. And then when I went back to the director, he would know, well, we're going to chop out this bit, or we're going to take out this bit and do something else here. But 3/4 of that film I got to do as well, which was kind of interesting. That doesn't always happen. A lot of the time it
Has
is.
the have the short lists influenced the storyboards at all? In any
Uh,
case.
they do in a way, because the director will usually have some kind of shot list that he wants, and they'll give me the information.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the final shot list that I think they make up after boards are done and stuff. Because there's a lot of time, of course, they'll have the storyboarded section of a scene, but then they'll have other parts of the scene that haven't been drawn. And a lot of the time they just have a list because it's like, it's a headshot, it's over shoulder one,
Yeah.
looking at whoever the other person is, over shoulder two, looking back. There'll be a set of stuff that will be probably within a shot list form. I sometimes wonder, is it the director that sits with the storyboards, and nobody else sees them? But then I just answered my own question in my head, because a lot of the time on Game of Thrones, the storyboards would be up on a big board, and the director would be marking them off as he got or she got the section of shots. They would be taking them, boom, 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 just working their way through, and that was kind of interesting to know that that's a way of doing it. Because I know again with me, I had done that because I wasn't certain of my confidence level when I started off, so I needed to know that I'd got these shots. So I would have my storyboard list with me, and have worked out what I needed. And then I would sit and going through them and putting an X through things as I knew I'd got them. So yeah, so it's shot lists. Yeah, it's another part of the thing, really. Because I mean, of course, directors can do a whole movie with just shot lists and no storyboards.
True.
I've worked with Neil Jordan 3 times, and it's been very interesting because Neil's only needed a few things storyboarded in any of the movies. So normally I only get about a month working with Neil Jordan. And but what's been interesting working with him is he's got the whole film in his head. I mean, he knows what he wants, and so he only gets things that kind of have a certain combination of elements taking place, and that may have a continual shot somewhere or whatever. And if it's if it's an action thing, I think it's more to convince the producers possibly that he's thought it all out. But most of it's in his head. I mean,
the reason that I asked that question was because as a director, like my approach would be to, what I've done so far has been like shortlist the entire thing and then see which ones do I really need storyboard, which ones would benefit the cast and crew, seeing drawn as some sort of picture instead of me having to go explain the same thing over and over again multiple times.
So, go picture.
Exactly.
That's what we're shooting. Do you see the way the frame is there? Do you see where the characters are? That's what we're shooting. Yeah, no, I would agree. But see, then maybe you see in a lot of cases the director may well have the shot list that he's explaining to producers about. And when they're asking me to do the drawings, they've already thought out, what those shots may be. I would assume that that's probably the case. I mean, it's just that it's something that I don't often have to deal with, but I can. You see, a lot of the stuff's not now. I mean, especially with the world of Zoom and so on. I'm working on a film at the moment, and the thing is, I'm drawing scenes. I have a discussion with the director. Usually, I draw up a version of the scene, then I send it across him, so he's got that to look at. While he's then coming back to me and explaining the angle that he wants and so on. And it's really nice way of doing things. It's just you kind of usually do 2 versions of it. You do the first version, which is just coming out of my head, and then you get the second version, which is coming out of that combination of things that make sense. And luckily, there's less stress on that one at the moment. But yeah,
we also have certain softwares which are helpful for storyboarding as well, like 3D softwares which have recently taken over storyboarding in the process, as it like they help you basically reconstruct the scene in 3D and see how it could be I guess changed in real time. What's your thought? What do you think about that, like, and the future of storyboarding?
I just think there's a possibility that I get less work. So I got to go and direct something. No, the thing is, because on Game of Thrones we were kind of working in a way like that. The director would talk to me, so I would draw up the storyboards that the director was explaining to me. Then they would impart the information that they wanted to the CGI department, who would be constructing some of the elements in a 3D environment. Now, sometimes the CGI department would rush ahead of things because the producers at the top were asking, where, have you talked about this bit of the job, or this bit of the job, or this bit of the job? And sometimes the director may not have talked about that bit of the job, and the CGI department would rush ahead, and then the director and I would have a chat, and I would draw up the boards for the director, And the director would then go back to the CGI department and say, "No, this is all wrong. I don't want this. I don't need that. I don't need that. I don't need that. Here's the board. Let's do this." And so,
Mhm.
so the point is, there's an awful lot of patience needed, patience and work fast and hard to get information through. And sometimes you step on each other's toes in different departments. But CGI, there's so many movies now. I mean, I don't think Marvel could ever do a movie without CGI a version of the storyboard, I guess. And that's not a criticism. It's just the fact that there's so many elements involved. And one of
Yeah.
the good things with CGI is you are getting to see a version where all of the elements are moving, and they're moving in positions that you can see how they look on the frame. So I suppose you're getting a perfect frame before it's acted out. But then, it does make you wonder how much of the or how many elements have to change once the actors get into position and do their thing. Um, but it walks hand in hand with filmmaking now. I mean, if you've got the money to do CGI version, fantastic. Sometimes maybe that's it. There maybe isn't the money in place to do a big CGI version of the piece. Although there's a lot of quick CGI operators. What are your options? Not giving equal gender equality options in the workfield?
I think it should be opinions. What are your opinions on not? I think it's a more general filmmaking question, I guess. So
In not giving equal gender. Not
I
giving it
don't see.
to me. Whoever's good for the job is who gets the job, really. And I think it's more down to the treatment of the people that get the jobs. Do you treat people properly or do you not? To me, gender isn't an issue. I mean, in the world that I live in, it's like if somebody's male, female, or in between, it's kind of like go for it. I mean, if you're good at what you do, you're going to do it. The I've seen gender issues on set, and I've seen gender issues around the working system on filmmaking. But I've seen the same issues in the working world of comic strips, and I've seen the same issues in people in shops. The problem is our world's thinking is off, and the more I guess the more gender is discussed, the better it is for gender. But the point is, nobody should be out of the running for a job, depending on what gender they are. I mean, it shouldn't be a case that all guys get jobs or all girls get jobs. I mean, all women get jobs, whatever. It's like there's a need for the skill levels of the people that are applying for a job to get the job. And I'm afraid, the way the world's going at the moment, we're kind of going back in some ways to a time when you had to be good at your craft. And I don't see that as a bad thing either in some respects, because there's a long period of time where, um, based on just qualifications that somebody had, they got a job, but they may not have been actually very good at the practical use of or doing of that job. And we're in a weird situation, where I remember one of the things that I was told years ago was that there was a period of time where the film viewing public were only interested supposedly in male heroes, male action heroes. That was what they went to see. It wasn't why I went to see a movie. It just so happened that it may have been a movie with a male action hero or something in it. But I was more interested in seeing how the actors worked, how they performed. And you know I mean, my DVD collection is definitely not male action heroes, and that's it. And I get so bored with that. I want interesting lives, and I want brilliant actors portraying them. And I mean, a lot of my favorite films end up with women lead characters that just take over. They're just brilliant, and the same thing with music. So, so what can I say about it? To me, I don't have a problem with what gender anybody is, and I think everybody has the chance to be in and be fairly paid as well. That's the other thing. If you're doing the same job as if this is a question of female to male, if you're doing the same job as your male counterpart and they're getting paid more, that's not really a good sign. One of the great things working with HBO was that HBO had every gender under the sun and a few that I didn't even know about mixed in there. That the thing was that everybody worked together, and people that were at the top were the people that were good at their jobs, all the way through the HBO crew. People. It was based on what can you do. I mean, it's one of the reasons. I mean, I'd love to do more with them, but I mean, it's one of the reasons why you know, I just love that. I just love the fact that it was so balanced, and you went into work feeling great because everybody was just working away together. But there's issues that will not go away at the moment. I mean, we as a planet need to change, not individual working systems, because they will alter as people change. So to me, there's equality. There should be equality in everything.
Final question for tonight, because we've almost run out of time and we're kind of going over time too, but that's fine. Any advice for aspiring young artists, comic book artists, or storyboarding artists? Any advice?
Oh man, comic book artists and storyboard artists. If your style, I guess for comic book artists, if your style is a realistic style, then constantly inform yourself by realism. Be watching, fill your head with movie images, fill your head with a world that you can see outside, reference it all the time, get out with a camera, have a camera with you all the time. I mean, everybody does with their phone now. Take things that you think are interesting, just from somebody standing in the street to flipping, vehicles going past, to buildings, to the way shadow falls, to, light and shadow, everything. Because to me, that's the big information that you need in your arsenal as somebody who's trying to convince somebody else to believe in the world that they're creating. Cartoon work, again, cartoon comic work, and to me, there's a difference in the realism style and the cartoon style. The cartoon style has got to be energetic and fun and so on. And it's aiming at a slightly different audience most of the time, and that's just, again, that's a skill that's developed from developing a style. Now, style comes from our mistakes. One of the biggest things that we have going for us is a flawed style that people like. If we create drawings that people like, the reason why they like those drawings over somebody else's drawings is because of the weird flaws in the way you see the world, because they're coming out in the artwork that you do. That's your style. If we all were perfect artists, we'd all be drawing exactly the same way. And the only thing that would make a difference is which viewpoint we had taken. But this is one of the things that I love about, I mean, it's one of the reasons why I've got a rack full of books back there and another rack over here full of books, and some more out the back, is that to me, there's so many art styles that are so beautiful to look at, and their approach to doing artwork is so incredible. So, the style comes out of our flaws. I mean, it's very human. It's very real. So you go out and analyze the world. You go and see the world, and you take photos of the world, and you have your own reference of the world. It's not all from somebody else's viewpoint. What somebody else has seen. Now, filmmaking, and certainly, I've been watching a ton of film noir, old black and white Hollywood films and other things. I just got a batch of Kurosawa to watch. I've got this big thing out. There was a job I was going to be on, and one of the reference points was Kurosawa. So I went out and bought a load of movies. Then the job fell through, but I've got the movies. Anyway, the point is I'm going to be watching those at some point, because I've seen them before, but there's this beauty about the way a story is constructed and told that you see in movies. But again, it's about the drawing side of it. It's about film noir is great for shadows and light, and if we can make more color films that are in shadows and light, like the old movies, there's a certain different quality that sometimes we miss out, because color, we get away with a lot of things in color. There's a beautiful film. A vampire film. And again, I know I'm going to get this title wrong, but it's something like "The Girl Walks Home Alone at Night," something like that. And
the Iranian film, yeah.
Yes,
The black
and
yeah.
filmed in Los Angeles or something, I think. And it's this beautiful letterbox format film, and it is stunning visually to look at. It's just the most gorgeous film. It's a crazy, quirky story, but it's brilliant to see. So, okay, so that's right. That was we were comic booking there. If you want to be a storyboard artist doing feature films or doing films or anything, um, obviously, if you're a cartoon artist, you aim towards animation or something because that's where your style is more suited. But if you're a realism drawer and you want to get into film storyboarding, you're going to have to draw a lot of stuff first, I think. And I think one of the greatest things is getting onto short films. Go in and offer your services to somebody to storyboard a short film, not a feature, just because the shorts give you an opportunity to learn how to draw a 10-minute script. How to, like, usually maximum they're 10 anyway. How to keep stuff tight, how to understand what visuals you need, but also I think again it's informing yourself constantly by film. And you see, one of the reasons I talk about the older films is that they tell a story in a way that everything counts, everything that's there on screen counts, and it's a very methodical way of telling a story, but it's beautiful. There's so much stuff going on in them. Modern films are great, but they're super edited, they're super fast editing a lot of the time, and it's a very different approach to it. And a lot of the time, that's the handheld camera approach, really. I mean, the fast editing, the movement of things, and it's great, but it's in a way there's a fundamental set of steps to learn. And a lot of the time you'll see those in the older movies. And watch any Hitchcock movies. Hitchcock storyboarded everything. He storyboarded his frames. I mean, there are books out there of Hitchcock's thinking. There's a especially good one, I think, that's about Alfred Hitchcock's approach to filmmaking. Because one of the things that Hitchcock always said was he got bored with the actual filming process because he'd already made the film on paper first. He had worked it all out. So every day he would go in and it'd be like, okay, we're going to go for the shower scene today, or the next 3 days or whatever. And so we need to get that close up of the knife coming in. That's what we're doing first, and blah, blah, blah. And then, okay, now we're going on to water in the shower, whatever it is. Anyway, the point being that he had already got those shots drawn. And so it's like we were saying, if you've got those up on the wall somewhere and you're seeing, these are the shots I need because they tell me the whole film. You then it's easy to film it. So you cannot do wrong with looking at some of the early Hitchcock films. Things like Psycho, things like Rear Window is brilliant because again it's one man in a room, but you're seeing everything across the room, across the garden type area, and there's a lot of his films that are great for just understanding the way film works and why he cuts away to something else. But I would indulge in and try to find the films that you think are the best example of a film that you want to watch, because I mean, one of the great things I have in this lockdown is I've watched so many films. I've also seen so many things that I realized, oh, that's not good. But that's great to actually know why you think it's not good, why you think that film doesn't work. Sometimes it's performances, sometimes it's just lame storytelling, So it's always a worry even saying these things, because if you ever did get the chance where somebody turns around and said, right, you're directing your first feature film, and then you're going to go, oh my God, am I going to have all this bad storytelling in it? And you're hoping that you're not going to. But no, there's a practice thing as well, practice. But I do think for film stuff, the best steps are starting to work in film. So if you know anybody that's making a short, if you've got friends that are making a short that you can actually help out in, go and do it. And if people have got money that they're paying, brilliant. I mean, Jesus, they have to, they have to at least feed you. But the thing is, because some of my first things that I did in film, I did as a spec. I did them for very little money, or I did them for just because I liked the project, and it was only going to be a couple of days out of my life. And I thought I'd like to see this project made. Then when I started to do the stuff for myself, now I can spend as much time as I want on the work that I do for myself, which is also a good thing. If you're a filmmaker that can draw, that can work out your stuff, work it out for yourself and go and make your film. I mean, and I know in COVID it's a slightly more difficult option. I know there's probably restrictions in places because there certainly are over here, but there's still things that you can do to construct a film on the basis of what you can go out and do. You know, we're told we're allowed to walk. You know, we're allowed to go out and walk the dog or something. And the thing about that is that if I can get rid of some of the work that I'm actually doing at the moment, if I can finish it, it means that one of these days I'm going to go out looking for my lights and shadows and whatever and try and come up with some avant-garde movie that allows me to actually make a film because because I do like that. I mean, it won't be something particularly that anybody's going to see, but it'll be something that I'll be happy making. So,
Awesome.
okay.
That's fantastic. William, thank you so much for joining in.
Well,
I'm still swimming. Like, yeah, I gotta sit and let it sink in, I guess. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
There's a million years of stuff I could keep talking about. So, no, it's been lovely. Thank you very much. Okay. So, Sri Lanka, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, William. See you again soon. All right.
All right. Take it easy.